This is the MHS Pawdcast, the online radio voice of Metuchen High School.
Hey everyone, what's going on? And welcome to the latest edition of the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online voice of Metuchen High with Julia Hirschfield. I'm Kalegi. We have a lot of interesting subjects to get to today. We're first going to start with an interview with Dr. Caputo about the COVID-19 testing that's currently being offered at Metuchen High School. Then we'll be joined by two seniors, Vegas Rockafeller and Maggie Kleiner, who are spearheading an effort to try to change the school schedule virtually and in person, given the current circumstances, Zoom fatigue, and more. So we'll let them share their perspective. And finally, Josh Hyman and I will get into all the latest in winter sports, including great starts for the boys and girls basketball teams. But before that, here are the announcements from Julia Hirschfield.
Thank you, Eddie. Spring sports physicals will take place on Thursday, February 25th from 8:30 a.m. until 10:30 a.m. if your last name begins with A through L, and Thursday, March 11th at the same time for letters M through Z. All forms must be submitted to the nurse by Wednesday, February 24th. Pick up a physical packet from the main office or the middle table in the vestibule. The February Principals newsletter is now available on the school website under the News tab. Also, a reminder that there is no school this Monday, February 15th, for observance of President's Day. That's all for today. Back to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Julia. And now let's move into our first interview of the day, as Itai Geller and I will talk to Superintendent Dr. Vincent Caputo. In recent months, coronavirus cases have spiked across New Jersey, and unfortunately, Metuchen has been no exception. Starting last month, though, Metuchen High School began offering free coronavirus testing to staff and students, and it's slowly expanding. To discuss this, as well as all the latest in this unique school year and how Metuchen High School is trying to navigate it, it's great to be joined once again by Metuchen Superintendent Dr. Vincent Caputo. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Hi, Eddie. You're welcome. Good to see you guys.
All right, to kick things off, how did you first go about setting up the COVID-19 testing process at MHS, and who is this testing currently open to? How does someone schedule a test?
Hi, Ty. How you doing? Good. So back in December, a couple of districts in the county had talked about at a superintendent roundtable Zoom call about that they were thinking about offering testing in district. Old Bridge, South River, Sayreville, Highland Park, those were some of the districts that preceded us in the county. So we kind of learned a little bit about their journey and their steps and missteps. Some of them partnered with the town, others did it on their own. We knew the need was important. Stopping the transmission and the spread of coronavirus is so very important. And we know that anytime that we can identify a family member or community member that's positive and get that person isolated, we reduce the spread by that much, right? So every day that person, and usually they're asymptomatic, every day that person is not mixing among family members and friends and community is that much less chance for spread. So we knew that testing was going to be so critical to that. Testing is pretty hard to get. You have to schedule something at Walgreens or your doctors. It's not as convenient as it should be. So we thought we needed to bring testing in the district. Now, this was over Christmas break. We put the final touches on our plan. We also knew that students and faculty coming back after the Christmas break, where there was a higher chance that some may have broken quarantine rules, some may have seen friends and family, some may have traveled. We knew that would be really important. So what we did is we interviewed a number of companies in December, settled on back to work solutions. A couple of districts were using them as well. Scheduled them to start on New Year's Eve. We did our first testing on New Year's Eve. We continued again that weekend, right before students came back, and then did it on the first day of school back. And we've done it every Thursday and Saturday since then. Since we started on New Year's Eve, we've tested 791 individuals, and we found 18 positives. Most of those positives reported back were asymptomatic, and they're just doing their part for public health to get tested, to protect their family and their friends. And we're really thankful they did that. So that's kind of our process right now. The way you get signed up is we send a reminder every week. You set up a telemed visit with a nurse practitioner or a doctor. The visit's short. They ask you some questions about symptoms and traveling and any quarantining. And They send you a prescription via email. You print out that prescription. You also go back on their website and pick a time that you want to come. You get a 15-minute interval, and usually the wait is not too bad. I've done testing myself. We do the testing at the wrestling room. Right now, we may have to change that location if we're able to offer a wrestling season, which we're planning to. So that's something that at the end of the month, we may have to change. But right now, we're offering the wrestling room. You come in your prescribed time slot that you selected. And the process once you get inside is really simple. You sit down, you remove your mask down just past your nose. One of the techs, and we've had consistent people from Back to Work Solutions, they do a nasal swab. And with 1 to 3 days, I got my results back in 36 hours. I know some of our folks have gotten 24, 26, 27 hours. So, but 1 to 3 days, they guarantee, and you'll know if you're even asymptomatic for COVID. These are the PCR tests, so they're highly reliable. And we've used that to stop the spread both in the school and even more importantly, really in the community.
So you mentioned how many people have participated already so far. Are you happy with the current participation you're seeing? And are there any plans to expand this any further? Because if I'm not mistaken, you have done an initial expansion to include the families of students and of staff, but is there any plans to expand it? And are you happy with how it's going so far?
Yeah, so the second part, I am happy. I never thought of a superintendent. I would have to, engage in public health the way we are, right? But anything that we can do to make testing easier for our community, that's better. People are taking advantage of it, 791 people, and I think that's great. I'd like to have 791 people every week. However, 791 people in 6 weeks is pretty good. Stopping 18 people from not knowing they're asymptomatic and spreading it is hugely important. And what was your first question, Eddie?
I was just about any are you happy and any plans to expand?
So we were originally thinking that we wanted to be able to test our staff. And then that was before returning to school after the winter break. Then we expanded it to student athletes because we knew that basketball was starting on January 11th. So we knew it'd be critical that this is the first time we were experimenting bringing back student athletes indoors. We had a fairly successful outdoor season. We ran on our regular contingent of sports and band with minimal shutdowns. But again, that was outside, right? So inside was going to be a whole new challenge. So we wanted to offer that for the basketball players starting before January 11th when basketball started. And after that, as you mentioned, we quickly upgraded that to all of our students were eligible. And then a couple weeks later, we invited the families of students and also the families of staff. A lot of staff don't necessarily live in Metuchen, but they work here. And COVID-19 doesn't know any kind of bounds between towns. So we've opened it up now to students and staff and the families of students and the families of staff, trying to do our part in the, in the public health crisis that we're in.
Okay, so for those who are still unaware, why is it essential to be tested for COVID-19 even if you don't feel like you have any symptoms?
Great question. We know that depending on the stats, I've seen anywhere from 25 to 50% of positive cases have come from individuals who are asymptomatic. Now, you could be asymptomatic and you'll never develop symptoms. You'll just carry the virus and maybe pass it on to somebody else. Or you may be pre-symptomatic that, today I'm feeling fine. I have the virus in me. It's replicating in me. I get a test. It shows up positive maybe, and I don't feel symptoms for a few more days. And the meanwhile, I might be spreading it around, right? It's scary to think that, that you or I can feel fine and maybe never develop symptoms, but could get someone else infected along the way. So that's a great question. And that's what this proactive testing does. Of course, when you're feeling sick or you've been in a gathering or you've been around someone who is positive, you should get tested. But it's also important to get just random proactive testing. I haven't been around people, but I could have touched my face. I could have breathed in some air from somebody. So the idea that I can get tested on a Thursday or a Saturday right here in Metuchen at the high school is really valuable. And we encourage our students, our staff, and their families to come on and take advantage of that.
Certainly important. And you've mentioned those 18 positive tests, and you said how many of which were asymptomatic, that people could have potentially spread the virus if they had not gotten tested in the first place then. So very important that you're doing that. So last thing, I want to shift gears a little bit to the classroom, because the last time we were joined by you, me and Joe talked to you right before the reopening of schools. And now it's been about 4 months since the reopening of schools. There's still kids going in person, but there's certainly less. Part of that caused, obviously, by the current COVID situation with cases going up in Metuchen. But recently, there have been some students who have brought to light some of the physical and mental health concerns that have come from the current online schedule. Also, there was a survey taken by the MEA that determined that 54% of the teachers who completed the survey felt unsafe teaching in the school building during these trying times. So there's still 4 months in the year. So I just want to ask you right now, as superintendent, do you see any potential change in the daily schedule or any other steps taken by the district to alleviate these types of issues at school and at home? And any other comments on the coalition's appearance at the Board of Ed meeting last night?
Yes, I'll start with the last question. It's always great to see our public come to our meetings, and I mean that. We're here we're a public entity. I'm a non-voting board member of the Metuchen elected Board of Education. The superintendent is a non-elected member. So I'm a member of that board, and it's really valuable to hear feedback. We hear feedback in lots of ways. You heard feedback publicly at a meeting, and that's the way feedback happens officially, but we also have feedback through social media and through emails. And there's been certainly a lot of chatter recently, the last 2 days, about a group of students coming to a meeting and doing an outstanding job presenting their case. They presented one possible solution. They also brought to light a bigger problem. So one possible solution might be to change schedules, right? Might be to look at how we offer opportunities and choice for students. But I like to look at what might be a bigger problem that brought to our attention, and not that this is surprising to us, but we have to find out the extent of what this mental health crisis that we heard about last night, right? We all know that we're all struggling. We've put in many programs. We've brought in outside third parties to the district. But we have to find out if this is pandemic related, if this is more than we've planned for. So we certainly listened. You know, I got criticized a little bit for saying we're listening last night. We are listening. And I think that's important. That's not a throwaway. We are listening. We just want to make sure we want to sure we identify what the problem is before we start proposing possible solutions, right? You mentioned a lot of other things in there too. You talked about the return to in-person. So yeah, we've been in person for some of our special needs populations, some of our youngest students since September, for everybody else since October. We had those 2 planned 8-day breaks before the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, where families could isolate if they want to see an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent that hasn't been out of the house. Then we had our break. So we've been in for a good proportion of the time. And as you mentioned, in-person attendance has started high, dipped in some schools, and has risen recently. The latest numbers this week, we have about 20% of the high school students attending in person, but much higher numbers, 48 to 60% at Campbell, Edgar, and Moss School. We've tried to return some additional students to full-time based on academic needs, social needs, behavioral needs, emotional needs, second language needs. So those students are attending each day. We're kind of at our maximum in Campbell, Moss, and Edgar. But as I've said, even with the A and B weekers starting last week, the week before, allowed to return in both weeks, we still have room. In fact, I had a parent reach out to me today to talk about, you know, the comfort with their student returning and how much their student values in-person instruction. So any students out there that are kind of toying with the idea of returning, feel free to reach out to the office at the high school, talk to Mr. Paragallo, talk to Ms. Coleman, Ms. Gupta in the guidance office, and we can get you in a couple days back to return. We're always looking to make things better. We're always looking to take the opinions, both those that we hear at a public meeting, those we hear on Facebook, but also those who reach out to me via email to say, please, we need to keep our students in full days. My student doesn't do well when they have to learn from, you know, their bedroom at home on their own. So there's varying opinions. We want to hear those. We want to act. We want to try to provide as many choices like we do with the in-person, hybrid, or full remote as we can. And you know, we know that our system's not perfect, but I think we're doing as good a job as any other district is doing. We're in person for those who want to be in person. We're full day for those parents and kids who need full day. We have the remote option for those that don't want to be home. We're still offering clubs, music, sports for those who feel comfortable participating. So we're trying to be everything to everybody. It's really tricky, and I'm sure there's more that we can do, and we're going to keep striving to do more each and every day.
So I just want to follow up with one last thing. One of the suggestions made by senior Maggie Kleiner, who's actually going to be joining us next year on the podcast, was about a district-wide survey to be able to reach out to some students, because the Coalition actually reached out to, I believe it was 200 or 300 students. But of course, just with the pandemic situation at hand, it's very difficult to get the word out. And as you mentioned yourself, Dr. Caputo, it's important to try to see exactly where the problem is before you can start planning for solutions. Do you think that creating a survey allowing for all students and teachers district-wide to try to share their own personal opinions could help you guys on an optimal path to provide the best education possible in this unprecedented time?
Yeah, I think that's well said. We heard a lot about schedules, and sure, schedules are one tool, one possible solution, but I was much more not interested, but much more focused on what are the specific problems. For example, if there's too much homework, there's ways that we can reduce homework. If there's too much screen time, there's ways that we can reduce screen time. If there's too much disconnect, because adults and children alike are feeling that kind of disconnect, that's a separate issue, right? So I do think there's an opportunity for us to survey our entire, fifth graders, eighth graders, seniors, as well as freshmen, everyone in between, as well as parents, to find out how they're doing. Really, like a counseling question is how are you? How are you doing? What can we do to make that better? We heard from 12 people last night, and probably more, but represented by 12 people that they've jumped to, we have some issues. I want to learn more about those, but we think you should change the schedule for us. And that may be an option, but I've heard from an equal number of people today who watched or heard that said, whoa, hold on, here's my story. I'm not necessarily, so we gotta be careful, as you said, about jumping to solutions before we know what the specific problems are. So we wanna really develop a survey that allows us to collect information about how people are doing. How are you? How are you doing? What can we do? How can we partner with the community? How can we partner with your families, right? Because this is not just a school issue. We have you for 7 hours a day, but the other 17 hours, you're with your family and community. How can we partner with the community? How can we partner with the family and also make the school experience that much better? So I would expect a survey in a few weeks. We have to ask the right questions. Surveying is tricky. I mean, certainly you can devise a survey that asks a certain question because you want to get a certain answer. We're going to try to ask ask questions that lead us to the answers to how are you? How are our students? How are our parents? What can we do to help?
Well, certainly surveys have worked. I remember when you guys did the wellness check back last spring, and certainly change has happened in the district that you're trying to seek out and making what's best for students, just like the COVID testing that we've alluded to, food distribution, among other things. So we appreciate the work you've been doing, and hopefully we can everybody can pitch in and work together and try to make the best possible situation here through these last 4 months of the year. Dr. Caputo, I appreciate you joining us today to add some transparency to this entire situation.
Thanks, Eddie. Anytime.
All right, so when we come back, we'll be joined by Maggie Kleiner and Vegas Rockafeller to hear their side of the story on the MHS Coalition about changing the schedule. Plus, Josh Hyman and I will talk winter sports, including a red-hot start for the Metuchen girls basketball team. For Itai Geller, I'm Eddie Kalegi. This is the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online voice of MHS.
Having trouble seeing the board in class? Do you need safety glasses for your school sport? If you answered yes to either of these questions, head over to Optique Unique, the eyeglass store at 406 Main Street in Metuchen. Optique Unique does it all. Not only do they offer eyewear for all ages, they also sell sports-specific safety glasses for kids and adults. Call them at 732-321-2020. That's 732-321-2020, or visit OptiqueUnique.com. Do you want to build character, build confidence, or even build yourself? All that and more can be accomplished at the Black Belt Institute at 23 New Street, right here in Metuchen. Students of all ages have been able to learn respect, discipline, fitness, and self-defense from their experienced instructors for over 20 years. Whether you're an adult looking for stress reduction or know someone young who has interest in Taekwondo, the Black Belt Institute is the place to go. The Institute takes a fun approach at teaching the rules of self-defense, instilling in their students an I-can-do-it attitude. Interested in taking a class? Call them at 732-205-9797 or visit their website at blackbeltinst.com. Once again, that's 732-205-9797 or blackbeltinst.com. The Black Belt Institute, Metuchen's leader in martial arts and fitness.
Welcome back to the Metuchen High School Podcast, the online voice of Metuchen High. I'm Eddie Kalegi with Joe Stibich. Over the past few weeks, students at Metuchen High School have launched a coalition to change the daily school schedule. To hear their reasoning and allow them to have a platform here, it's great to be joined by two of the leaders of this coalition, seniors Vegas Rockafeller and Maggie Kleiner. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
So before I get to you guys, Joe is actually pretty active in this as well. So I was hoping, Joe, you could kind of elaborate, because from what I've heard, you were one of the people who helped spearhead this. So just give us a little background on the whole situation.
Yeah, Vegas and Natalie made a survey for a lot of the students to take, and not a lot of people were very satisfied with where we were at, where we still are at. And so I really wanted to help them in any way I could. And so I helped them grow the group me that we are currently using, and write the email.
So just oh, you were lagging a little bit, Joe. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. That I'm sure that that they would be more qualified to elaborate on. They did more.
Yeah, so why don't we turn it to you guys. Maggie, how about you first? Just talk about a little, for people who don't know the whole problem here, from both, because you alluded to last night during your speech that everybody saw at the Board of Education meeting about the physical strain of these Zoom classes, but also the mental health issues. So I was hoping maybe you could elaborate a little about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anyone who watched the board meeting last night, I actually spoke twice. I'd only planned on speaking once. Vegas and I had both written responses prior, but I felt very moved by the words of my classmates and also the words of the board, and I wanted to talk about my personal experience. We learned from the mid-year survey that Natalie and Vegas sent out that a lot of kids are really struggling mentally. I can speak to this personally. I think that kids who have never experienced symptoms of depression and anxiety are starting to feel those on a regular basis. Getting up and doing the same routine every single day. And like you said, not to mention the physical repercussions as well. Everyone's getting headaches, and it's definitely been a big adjustment, and it hasn't been something that we should have had to adjust to, having that sort of pain. So I also spoke about the fact that I have been diagnosed for 2 or 3 years now, and my resources are fantastic. I have outside resources. I have a close relationship with my guidance counselor and another counselor at the school, and I am still struggling. So it's difficult to imagine the pain that others must be feeling if they have less support. So I really wanted to talk about that, because I feel that the board has not addressed those students who can't speak up for themselves as well as we can. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's definitely a fair problem as well here, because with the pandemic, we know just with the situation at hand that it's really exemplified any sort of mental health issues right now. And of course, these school situations certainly does not help. Not having socialization is one thing, but also having to be on a screen constantly. It's just got a lot of physical strain as well. Vegas, maybe you could talk a little more about that and why you're so motivated about this cause as well.
Yeah, certainly. So over the course of since September, since the start of the school year, I mean, students, there's eye strain, there's headaches. An article came out the other day that said students on remote online school for 6+ hours per day are starting to experience symptoms of mild concussion. So like headaches, blurry vision, eye strain, like back pain as well. So the toll there's a great physical toll as well as the mental toll that Maggie was talking about. And for me, one of the reasons why I was so motivated to spearhead this and try to get this up off the ground is there are students, like Maggie was alluding to, who are silently suffering. There are students who don't feel like they have the power to go out to these Board of Ed meetings and speak up for themselves. And we feel that we have the power to do this and to come out, and we're allowing ourselves to come out and do this while other students' mental health or mental illnesses may hold them back from coming out to these Board of Ed meetings. So we are trying to advocate for those who are silently suffering. And we know there are students who are silently suffering in the district and in our school as well. So that's probably the main reason why I wanted to get this up off the ground.
So the Coalition was obviously given a substantial platform at Tuesday's Board of Ed meeting. I personally am pretty happy with the direction we're going. Could you guys talk more about that, though, how we're feeling?
Yeah, I'll go first. So I feel that the direction in general that we're headed is amazing. The support that we got, not just from our peers, but also from parents and teachers who agree with us, has been incredible. And, you know, that's just coming from me personally. I'm sure that Vegas and Natalie and Joe and other people who spoke have also gotten the same recognition. One thing that I feel like we have to take into consideration when we think about the board meeting itself is that they had very little time to prepare for this. Certainly it's been a long time coming, and I know that they have addressed it in the past, but none of us went with the expectation of any sort of change on the spot, which I think may have been a miscommunication, or maybe they just were a little bit confused about what we expected, but we just really wanted to voice our concern for ourselves and for others. That being said, I am excited. I'm optimistic because, you know, you're right. We had a substantial platform. We took over the entire meeting. That is amazing. Right now, we are only representing about 150 students. And I blame that on the fact that we can't reach everybody. And I'm sure that we would be representing more in the actual group. But I feel really, really good about where it's headed. And even the smallest amount of change is fantastic.
Yeah, and before you go, Vegas, I just want to add to what Maggie said. Like, the most difficult part of this, you know, with any sort of activism or trying to change things at school, it's difficult to reach out to people right now because of the pandemic, and it's also difficult to get people to go in person. So it was nice to see that 7 students were there to speak and voice their opinion. 7 or 8, I think it was actually 8, but it's nice. Yeah. But nonetheless, it's nice to see that a lot of seniors and a lot of students across the 4 grades are trying to voice their opinions and hoping to see some change. Vegas, you guys went to the Board of Ed meeting last night. What are you looking towards for your next steps to try to help to make some change and maybe see this Zoom schedule change in some way for these students?
Yeah, so our next steps are we are pressuring the board and administration to send out a district-wide survey to all grades, all schools. We do not have the power ourselves to reach the entire student body at the high school, let alone the district. So who does have that power is Dr. Caputo and the board members, and they have yet to use that power, which is concerning because they need to reach out. If they feel that the system is working so well, there's nothing to back that up because they have no concrete evidence of that by means of a survey or whatever it is. So we're pressuring them to release a survey, send it out to all students, and they can also send it to parents to ask how they feel their children are doing. And yeah, right now that's our next step because we want data, right? We recognize that our survey that we sent out, there is some bias there because most people that would take it probably want change. So to help eliminate that bias, the district could send out a survey and have everybody take it. And that would give us some more concrete data on how the students, as the student body as a whole, is coping with this current 6-hour school day schedule, remote school day schedule.
Yeah, I think that's key as well because, for example, there was that survey a couple of weeks ago of teachers, and it was 53% of teachers who took the survey said they did not feel safe. That wasn't 50%. of teachers in general. So it's important to get everybody's representation involved here. My last question, of course, there's going to be some people who might refute you guys or might not want to really join this coalition. Some people might argue that, for example, with virtual schooling, if you're losing time in class that you might not maximize on the opportunity to work with your teachers one-on-one or just learn more from the teachers in general, and you might be left with more independent work. Others might say, we're heading towards the spring. The pandemic is starting to round a corner, only 4 months to go. How do you guys appeal to those people and try to get them on your side?
Yeah, so I had my mom post on Facebook Monday night about how we were speaking at the board and just in general. And immediately I got a lot of feedback that was concerned parents about, how much of the curriculum we're going to get through. Some parents were concerned about sending their kids off to college, fearing that they wouldn't have covered as much if we had a schedule change. And those are all super valid. And, Vegas and I and the rest of the coalition really value other opinions because they're important. Everyone's opinions are important. Everyone's perspective is different. We recognize that there are those who are happy with this schedule and those who are neutral, and that's okay as well. And more than anything, we are glad that there are students who aren't suffering. That's amazing. But they're in the minority, at least from what we've heard. And again, we don't have that concrete data, and we're looking to find that. But what I would say is people are afraid of change, good or bad. Change is scary. I'm afraid of change. I get that. Schedule change doesn't immediately mean less school. There are so many ways that you can put it so that it is not, I think when people hear schedule change, they think that we're demanding half days every day or something, just going from one side immediately to the other. And that's not the case. We have told the board that we are willing to negotiate with them, talk to them. We've given them so many options from other districts. We're really open to communication about this, and we understand that not everybody can be happy, but we want to meet in the middle and make sure that teachers are still covering a substantial amount with making sure that their students are actually happy to learn.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this interview. I commend both of you and everyone else in the coalition who's trying to work to make what's best for all students. And like you said, change takes a long time, but you're starting to see some change happening, and hopefully we can see some change in the near future. But Maggie and Vegas, thanks so much for joining us today, and best of luck going forwards.
Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you.
All right, so let's move into our sports report now with Josh Hyman. Well, it's February, and that means the winter sports season, after a long hiatus, has gotten started for several Metuchen teams. Eddie Kalegi here with Josh Hyman to break it all down. And I want to start with the boys and girls basketball teams. First off, a shout out to Ben Salaski and the Media Club, Jada Victor Morris, Richard Ho, and Mr. Zanetta, who have been helping us out with these broadcasts. If you haven't checked them out already, you can find the Bulldog Report on YouTube. I'll link it in the description. And that's where we've been broadcasting boys and girls basketball games live this year, and we'll be doing that through the rest of the season. But let's talk about this boys team first. Josh, we witnessed a tough loss for the boys on Saturday where they had the lead against Denellen for most of the game and just let it slip away at the end. They allowed 13 points in the last 3 minutes without making a bucket themselves. Boys are 2-2. They're doing decent, and they have been without Dime Chiappa. But what does this team have to do to get going in the right direction and start to win these close games?
Well, I think we discussed this a lot the other day watching the game. I think it's just an issue of limiting the fouls, definitely, because that was a big issue, and also being more confident defensively under the basket. And we saw a lot of their points came from those big guys who were just charging up the middle and catching the Metuchen defense flat-footed. Other than that, I think they are in a good spot. Their three-pointers are good. Their passing is very solid. Their defense is good at spreading out the offense and stopping those possibilities from happening. But I think they just need to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more physical, and just a bit tougher under the basket and in those close competitions where it's a 50-50 ball.
Yeah, they have had a couple of good wins. They won on opening night, and then, of course, that win against South Plainfield in triple overtime. But A couple bright spots too. We can't be too negative here. Luke Schleck has played excellent basketball. He's made so many three-pointers. He hit 6 on Saturday, had 21 points. Michael Piavoso's been having a great year. Jai Dreher, Logan Grice. We've even seen some of the younger players like Max Cohn playing well. And as I alluded to on the last show, Coach Jensen has high expectations for this team. He's said multiple times that he thinks this could be the most talented group of players he's had since the 2006 GMC finalist team. So there's a lot to look forward to for the boys going forwards. They have had some tough games, and there's still 4 weeks to go. So a lot of time for the boys to get back together. As for the girls, they're in great position. They lost opening night against Middlesex, but since then they've ran off 4 consecutive victories to sit at 4-1. Chase Clavon and Molly Maleg are playing really well for this team, and they seem to be cruising. What do they have to do just to keep the momentum up into these next few games where they will have some tougher opponents?
Well, for the girls, I think it's a very similar situation. The boys, staying disciplined, staying confident, and not letting the games get away from them. For the past few years, we've seen a bit of a problem with that for the girls' teams where they're up a lot and, they unfortunately let the game, pass by them and get out of hand. And with this girls' team, a lot of them get very frustrated, very heated. We've seen a lot, especially from likes of Chase Clavon, who is, very, very emotional, very passionate, which is a good thing. But when things start to get out of hand, she's quick to crack under pressure. So I think, especially for her, she just has to keep her head level and stay calm and just keep competing. And that goes for the rest of the team as well. Just don't let the game get away from you in the fourth quarter. Other than that, they are playing very well. They have no problem scoring. So I think it's just, like we said with the boys, a matter of discipline and a matter of just focusing hard enough to win the games.
Yeah, back-to-back games Wednesday and Friday. They won by an average of 43 points. So they're in a nice position right now. Now, those were against teams like South Amboy and Brearley that were expected to struggle. But nonetheless, capitalizing in those games are important because you never know in high school basketball, and every win really is crucial. But the thing with the girls also, I've alluded to on the broadcast, we talked about it on one of the pregame shows, is they were streaky last year. They tend to be streaky. They win games, then they'll lose a few in a row. And in a 12-game season, if you want to have a streak, it's a win streak. And the fact that they've won 4 in a row is a good sign. Couple issues for the team. They have had a lot of turnovers this season. They've had an issue with traveling, specifically right under the basket with their forwards. So that's something they really have to try to work on. Overall shooting has been really good, especially from 3-point range. For example, on Wednesday, they went 6 of 7 from 3 in the second half. Cassidy Connors had 13 points, and some of the unsung heroes too, Cassidy Connors, Charlotte Breen, who have played really well for this team, not really expected to, and Aurelie Germain as well, a new player to the program, a sophomore who's been really playing the center position for this team. She gets a lot of rebounds. She's able to overpower a lot of people in the paint, even people that are her same size or maybe even taller, and her shot making has been excellent. She's been a nice filler for Sam Anton. So 4-1, kudos to Coach Glutz, and a great start for the team. Now, I also want to talk a little about winter track because we had Coach Holler on the show last time, but you missed out on the first few days because of snow. And of course, when there's snow and there's track, we know what happens. You guys are out shoveling the track. So how is that experience? And how are you guys moving into actually starting prepping for a track season?
Well, yeah, everybody knows that the shoveling this track is a bit of a ritual, a rite of passage, so to speak, here at Metuchen High School. You'll get the text in the morning, everybody bring a shovel, and you gotta load it up, and you go out there and everybody kind of gets into teams, and some kids will start shoveling right at the entrance, and then some kids will walk down to the other end, and you come and you start shoveling and you meet in the middle. And we have to do that. We got about an hour each day. We shoveled the half the track one day, half the track the next day. We also shoveled part of the high jump area for the throwers, and it's a good indicator of how hard the team wants to work, because a few guys, they won't be so into it. They might not work hard enough, or they might grumble, complain about it, and you'll get other guys who will they'll pick it up right away. They'll be working hard the whole hour, shoveling, helping other guys, guiding other guys, and telling them how to do things, where to go. And it is a good indicator, good test of, the personalities of the guys on the team, see who the leaders are, see who the hard workers are, see who's kind of just skidding by with the work. But I was really pleased with how everybody was doing. Everybody was pitching in, and really enthusiastic about it. And, Coach mentioned that too at the end of practice, where he said, he said, like, no other team does that pretty much. Very few people do that. And he quoted a very interesting quote where it's like, to be the best, you have to not do things that the best do. It's to do things that others aren't willing to do. And, a team that is willing to go out there in the freezing cold and, shovel their track, when nobody else wants to, is a really important thing, and is a great metaphor for the type of workers we get here in the Metuchen track program. Now, for the rest of the season, it's looking good. Unfortunately, we did lose today due to the snow, but we should be good at least by the end of the week. For the competitions, we're definitely having them, but I'm pretty sure Coach Holleran said it's only going to be dual meets and outdoors if he can do them. Obviously, because of the safety issues that are posed by crowded indoor meets. It is a bit of a bummer that a lot of these new kids are not going to have the experience or the pressure of going to these large meets. But like we say, something's better than nothing. So I'm just really happy that we're going to have the chance to compete, and these freshman guys are going to have a chance to get a feel what it's like to not only run but practice and compete at a varsity level possibly.
Yeah, and you said it. Getting to do anything in these circumstances is really key. And with track especially, like we've seen, for example, with basketball, that it's taken both the boys and girls teams a few games to really get in sync. For track, it's a whole other thing because you need to get in shape. You've got to train not just for the runners, but for the throwers, the vaulters. Everybody needs to be in shape and prepared. And that's kind of what Coach Holleran alluded to on the show a couple of weeks ago. That's the main important thing really for this winter, is getting people ready for hopefully down the line in March. You guys can start with some competitions against other schools. It'll probably, like you said, just be dual meets because no Metuchen relays or stuff like that, but getting to have competitions against just one school, it's still something to build on. And it gets the underclass, it's really good for both the upperclassmen and the underclassmen. It gets the upperclassmen that competition that they so desperately want, especially for those who missed out on that spring season last year. Like for you as senior and all the other seniors who missed out on their junior year, they want to be able to compete in their senior year. And then, like you said, for the freshmen as well, so they can start understanding what it's like, because the Metuchen track team is a team unlike any other. We all know that, and you mentioned the shoveling the track too. That's not something you'd see at any other school, really, for most other sports, but that really helps you guys build toughness, build camaraderie, and like you said, see who the leaders are so that you guys can sort of try to build a teamwork. And one thing that I think people kind of make the mistake about is that track is an individual sport. It's really a team effort. You think about relays and other things. You guys really need to be in sync with each other, the seniors coaching the freshmen. Just because it might not be a team sport and more of an individual sport doesn't mean that the team is not important. So that's something to consider as well. Last thing I want to talk about, Edison Metuchen boys ice hockey. Can't forget about them. They are still going on right now. Hasn't been a good year for them. They're 0-6 right now. They have 4 games to go, so still a chance to break into the win column. Chris Gittes not the coach this year, so it's been a little different for this team. One Metuchen player, Jake DeVito, has 2 goals this season, so shout out to him, but still 4 games to go. But once again, in this unique year, it's just nice to see some action going on the field, or on the court, or on the ice. And it's great to see that sports have been coming back, and hopefully, as things start to get better, the spring can look a lot more normal after we had no spring season last year. But that'll about wrap up today's show. A thank you to our guests today, Dr. Caputo, Vegas Rockafeller, and Maggie Kleiner. For Julia, Itai, Joe, and Josh Hyman, I'm Eddie Kalegi signing off. We'll see you next time here on the MHS Pawdcast, the online voice of Metuchen High School.